Welcome to the Phoenix Symphony's online series of behind the curtain interviews with the music makers of the 25-26 season. It's been a busy and beautiful December for the Symphony with our Home Alone in concert, Holiday Pops, The Messiah, and our upcoming Christmas Baroque concert, which we'll talk about today with conductor Patrick Dupré Quigley. Welcome, Patrick, or should I say welcome back after last year's beautiful Messiah that you conducted around the valley.
Well, thank you. It's always a joy to come back and work with you and the amazing musicians of the Phoenix Symphony.
So we were just reacquainting ourselves after the year. And Patrick, where are you right now? And what do you have upcoming before you get to Phoenix?
Sure, I am currently in New York for one more day. From here, I'm going to the Baltimore Symphony to perform a program of Handel and Bach and Charpentier, and then we'll be coming to you all. I was at the Houston Symphony last week, and we were working on Handel's Messiah, which, as you said, we've done before, and which is always a joy of this time of year to be able to perform.
Right. This seems like a very busy time for Baroque music.
Yes, yes, it really is. I'm lucky to work with two groups who have Baroque music at the center of their repertoire, Opera Lafayette and Ceramic Fire. But for the rest of the country, much of what I do is during the period that starts November 10th and goes to Christmas. And so I always think of it as Baroque camp time. So it's nice to be able to get together with musicians who are friends and be able to play things that are probably a little bit outside of the standard repertoire of the symphony, but are definitely the basis of what every other piece of music that we play that really comes from this time period.
Right. And I say you have selected a really fantastic program for our Baroque, Christmas Baroque concert, including Bach, Charpentier, Corelli, early Mozart, and even some Christmas carols.
Yeah.
Can you take us through this program briefly and describe why these pieces are great for a holiday concert?
Sure. I mean, on a grand scale, I think that all of these pieces really express a youthful joy that is part of the holiday season, but also that sound, which for us, I think, as Americans, is what someone like Martha Stewart would have had put on at her dinner parties or Christmas Day celebrations. And so it really is a time, and all of these pieces that have that brilliant sound of three brass players with and timpani with orchestra. We get to explore the music of Bach, but on this program we also get to talk and perform some pieces by some composers that perhaps don't make their appearance except around this time of year. Charpentier, a 17th century French composer who wrote for Louis XIV, and his remarkable fanfare for the Te Deum, as well as Corelli's Christmas Concerto, in addition to some really, really great carols sung by my dear friend Mary Elizabeth Williams.
Well, wonderful. Let's go a little bit deeper. In the Corelli's Christmas Concerto and Charpentier's Te Deum, I know they're very pretty, and they're yeah, I mean they're obviously, as you said, youthful works, but beautiful. I believe that they are some of the first, I guess, Western classical music that celebrate like in this Christmas tradition. Like,
Sure.
why is the Corelli called the Christmas Concerto?
Sure. The Corelli is called a Christmas concerto, one because it's a concerto grosso, which means that it's for the leaders of the orchestra to play back and forth with the full members of the orchestra. That's where the concerto part comes from. The Christmas part is that there is at the end there is an optional. It says ad libitum movement that says pastorale. So something that is in a very lilting 4/4, but in a triple rhythm within that 4/4. It's very, very much in very simple keys, and it's supposed to represent sort of the Christmas night. This form was later taken by many other Italian composers and otherwise, especially, I think you all are doing Handel's Messiah this week in the Pastoral Symphony. Handel had a sort of a couple of encounters with Corelli in Rome and certainly would have known this piece of music. And so it forms the basis for what we think of as Christmas music itself in the 18th century.
That's wonderful. We'll open the concert with Charpentier's Overture to Te Deum. Why does he open with the trumpets? Is this some kind of a celebration, or was it written for a celebration?
I mean, I would say that to be in the Royal Chapel of Louis the XIV at Versailles, any moment was a celebration, but on particularly celebratory feasts like Christmas Day, the chorus and orchestra would perform what was called a grand motet, a very big song. And this in particular is the grandest of motets, the Te Deum, which is almost always sung in a festive and explosive manner. And this is the fanfare to a much larger piece of music that involves large choir, large orchestra, but it begins with a very recognizable tune in the trumpet, dum bum bum ba dum bum bum dum da da dee da 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 dum da 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 da, which is it has this sort of French dance rhythm behind it at all times. And so it's very exciting to be able to perform this because we also get to use some of the techniques that are for French Baroque music, but that aren't written into the music. In fact, this music sounds a little bit more like jazz than what we think of 17th century music being, because at the time the tradition was we would swing the eighth notes just like you do in early 20th century jazz music. So it's across centuries, but really sort of, I think, will touch the audience in a place where we actually think of things being happy and joyous and bopping along. And it's definitely that piece.
Well, that reminds me of I had a former music history professor who always said if Bach was alive today, he'd be in some smoky jazz bar improvising on the piano for hours on end. Yeah,
I mean,
seems like
he definitely he spent his life in the equivalent of that. And the piece that we're performing this time, the third orchestral suite, was actually not written for necessarily the church, but probably performed with his group, the Collegium Musicum, which is a bunch of young players from the town and from the University of Leipzig, and they got together in what was, I mean. Either the equivalent of a smoky bar or maybe even a marijuana dispensary, which was the coffee house of the time. I mean, the idea that one would come and partake in caffeine was such like a almost licentious idea. And he wrote this music for friends to get together at this place that was social area, and also, it was also the post office. They would get together and play with their cups of coffee and otherwise to be able to play more informal music. And this is when Bach, I think, was probably in his most casual. We think of him as sort of being, this chorus master with 22 children and teaching various levels of boys choir and children's orchestra. But this was Bach with his friends and colleagues playing the best of what he wrote. Just counterpoint and his imitation of French court music.
Oh, that's interesting. I know that the Bach is probably has one of the most recognizable pieces in its second movement, the air. I know it's famous, and quite frankly, that is just one piece that offers the calmness, serenity, that really just stops us in our tracks in this very busy holiday season and all the stress that goes with it. The piece might be serene, but can you describe the kind of discipline that the musicians need in order to be able to perform this a peaceful piece?
Sure. I mean, the air, which is sort of has this misnomer, air on a G string, because it was arranged downward. It's actually in the key of G, but in the 19th century, it was arranged downward for solo violin. It's a piece that recalls Bach's training in Renaissance counterpoint. At all moments, there is a sostenuto or a sustaining of the upper three parts, the two violins and the violas, which are required to have a control of bow speed that can make this piece sound like the phrases last forever. It's almost as if Bach wrote something along the lines of the Barber Adagio for strings, but just hundreds of years earlier. Um, Underneath, there is the true motor of the piece, which is a stepwise motion, walking bass line. We're getting back to jazz again, where the cello played dum dum bum 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 bum, and the bass usually is playing pizzicato during this. It's plucking, and it what it basically feels like is like the piece is glowing at all time. We get this sense of light and peace, but also sort of passion radiating from the string instruments as they play almost in slow motion. It's like watching a dance troupe that has been dancing very fast and then slowly moves, takes uh, 17 bars in order to move their hand from here to here. It's like a stop motion film. It's really something that I think the Romantic composers heard and studied in Bach's music and applied to things of great profundity and music for angels and spiritual beings later on in late 19th century compositional practice.
It's a beautiful piece of music, part of a greater suite of tunes as well, and that is it has to be one of the most popular pieces that we always hear around the holidays. So we're really looking forward to being able to experience that. So we'll also be joined by star soprano Mary Elizabeth Williams for a series of Christmas carols arranged especially for Phoenix audiences, and also sharing a rendition of "O Holy Night." You arranged the carols yourself for our orchestra, which is amazing. But how have you made these traditional European Baroque masterworks specifically for the American Southwest? It's called Three Carols for Phoenix, and it's a set of pieces in Spanish and an African American spiritual, and also one in German. So, what inspired that?
I think that, well, the first piece in the set is Away in a Manger. We in North America think of that piece, the text of that piece, as being sung to a much different tune than people in England. So, if you were in England and someone said, "What does Away in a Manger sound like?" they would sing, "Away in a manger, no crib for a bed," which is not what I think we think of. We think of the American tune, "Away in a manger, no crib for a bed." So I started out by taking both of those two tunes and layering them over each other. And then to sort of have just a slightly more American feel about it. The first two verses are sung with the Spanish traditional words, Jesus en pesebre sin cuna nació, and then we finish with the sort of the plea that that finishes this the carol. Bless all the dear children in thy tender care. And I think much of the the motivic painting behind this carol is really about the universality of children at Christmas, and I think something that we should all perhaps think of at this time. The second piece is an arrangement of Over My Head, which is a really uh, just not just touching but profound spiritual, which uh, it's often it's a very very small melodic material. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. That's all there is to the musical portion of it. Um, I've taken a bit of Americana in the style of Randy Newman and arranged it for your wind quartet that is placed in sort of an offstage area to go back and forth with Mary Elizabeth as she sings Over My Head. They sing this sort of what it's something that is reminiscent of 19th century Americana that goes back and forth, and then those forces, along with the strings, join together to sing a very familiar spiritual, "Come by Here, Lord," which I think many people know, "Kumbaya." So that's the second, and then the third is a setting which I think setting a Silent Night, which I think is essential to the American experience of Christmas. It is a German carol, uh, uh, but I tried to arrange it with a little bit of the idea of what if European carols were encountered the idea of American minimalism. And so we have an ostinato in the pizzicato strings over and over again, which slowly becomes bow vibrato for the orchestra, as Mary Elizabeth begins by singing the original Stille Nacht, and then sings in English Silent Night, which I think is part of the American immigrant experience, which is that people came before us, they brought these carols in a European language, but we as an American population have adopted them as our own, as we should, and in many different languages and ways. I think that it's one of the great things about tunes that have entered sort of almost a folk music territory. When music enters the public domain, it gets transported many different places and is then assimilated into the cultures in which it lands. And I think that's the sort of the story of these three carols.
That's going to be magnificent, and particularly in the second part, knowing that the instrumentalists will be slightly off stage, and the Orpheum is theater where this performance happens is a beautiful theater. It's actually behind me right now on my back.
Oh, okay.
It's a stunning space. It's perfect for that kind of Baroque feeling. But what's really wonderful about the Orpheum Theater is its sense of history, and it's one of the first Orpheum theaters in the entire country.
Oh, wow.
It was the first movie house that was testing films for Los Angeles for Hollywood. So that was it's an interesting history of the piece, but this atmosphere that the Orpheum can connect with the music will be spectacular for our audience, I know. But I'm curious about one thing. So Mozart's on the program, and isn't
Yes.
he considered a classical composer and not a Baroque composer? And when you were programming his piece in particular, what about it made you think holiday and Baroque?
Sure. I mean, the idea of someone being a classical or a Baroque composer is something that we, as a modern society and a group of people who have needed to, through musicology, sort of put people into categorizable boxes, is something that was done post facto. I mean, I think that Mozart would have thought of himself as being in the tradition of Handel. In fact, he arranged the Messiah for his own forces and put it into German because he thought it was such an incredible piece. This is a very early piece of Mozart's. What the D major Divertimento, which is often referred to as the first Salzburg Symphony. It has a symphonic quality to its construction. But at that time, they were probably still using keyboard continuo, so harpsichord, in the orchestra. So it has a quality of the Baroque in terms of how the the way the harmonies work. It has a number of places of counterpoint where he adds in small fugues into what is otherwise sort of a light piece of music. And I think what it makes is putting Mozart on a Baroque program is allowing us to realize that what we think of as very distinct stylistic time periods really were running one into the other quite constantly. I mean, the transitions that happened in the 18th century were very gradual. It was not like the sort of the incredible shift that happened from the Renaissance to the Baroque, where we added basically a bass line and a melody. It's more about style rather than it is about uh, content. And so I think it's always nice for us to hear the young works of Mozart in the context of Bach and Corelli because he didn't live, he didn't live all that long after them, and their music was certainly still in his ear when he was composing. He transcribed the works of Bach and Handel. I think that it allows us to break down some walls in terms of who is a Baroque composer and who is a classical composer. I mean, personally, I really think of that time period as sort of this long 18th century that begins perhaps, in 1670 and goes all the way through 1815. And it's a development of the classical and neoclassical style that begins during that time period.
You really have beautiful explanations of the pieces on the program. As a conductor, and when you're finished with this program, what are you hoping that the audience will have felt or experienced in this particular concert?
Sure. I mean, I think that there is, often when we are experiencing music of the 20th and 21st century, there are radical shifts in harmony and great and large spans of melody, very, very loud moments and very, very soft moments. But the composers of the 18th century and its environs very much had different ways of drawing emotion out of the listener. And much of it was through subtlety, but also by using repetition of very simple harmonic ideas, much like the carols that we're going to hear, to draw out, to make us feel the slightest change in harmony as something momentous. And so it allows us to, I mean, I think it's sort of the difference between uh, you know, a, a a a really incredible wedding banquet and sort of a simple farm to table meal. When we're in the Baroque and the classical periods, we are really experiencing music in its most basic form. It's like, here's the most beautiful tomato that I could possibly taste. It was grown, it was picked for me on this date, and let's celebrate tomato. We don't have to, break it down and cook it for 7 days and figure out something because we have just this very specific, precious thing that we can sort of take and experience it by itself in all its glory. And I think that that's what we really experience in the music of the 18th century.
Well, we definitely have quite the menu in store for our audiences with Christmas Baroque. Patrick, it's been wonderful to spend some time with you today, and I know it's the middle of your craziest, busiest season. It's ours too. We understand, and we're all very grateful for your insight into this Christmas Baroque concert, your time to do so, and we can't wait to have you here. Tickets are still available at phoenixsymphony.org for both concerts, Saturday, December 20th at 7:30 p.m. and Sunday, December 21st at 2 o'clock p.m. at the beautiful Orpheum Theater in downtown Phoenix. In this magical time of year, we hope that you'll join us for the historic, playful, reflective concert. This is perfect for anyone who is just yearning for those peaceful holiday moments with your friends and family. We thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the Symphony.